Ariel Helwani post-fight at UFC 124 alongside UFC President Dana White. And Dana, the first time George St-Pierre fought Josh Koscheck, out-wrestled him. Did you expect him to outstrike him this time?
I didn't know what was going to happen in this fight. I didn't expect the fight to be as one-sided as it was. You know, it's funny because I saw Koscheck last night, and he said to me, he goes, I guarantee you he won't stand up with me. And George was saying tonight at the press conference, you know, I like to throw guys off their game. I like them to not know what to expect, and he definitely did that to Koscheck.
So you say you didn't expect the fight to be as one-sided. Does that mean you were disappointed by Koscheck's performance?
No, not at all, actually. I was actually impressed with George's. He went out there and used a stiff, sick jab in that first round, and really, he did all the damage to the eye in the first round. Literally in the first 6 or 7 jabs, he hurt him bad with that jab. And then continued to do it the rest of the fight. He looked good, and I got to say to Koscheck, you know, people out there always give Koscheck and talk about how he's a cheater and he didn't get the eye poke and all this stuff. Well, let me tell you what. In the third round, that doctor gave him the opportunity to get out of that fight. And his eye was shut, completely shut, and couldn't see. And he said, do you want to fight? Koscheck said yes, and continued and stayed in there the whole fight.
Considering the fact that most of the fight was contested on the feet, and George, you know, he was using the jab, but it looked like he was trying to be aggressive and to finish the fight. Do you think we'll stop hearing those criticisms about him sort of going the safe route every time out?
No. I think that when you're the long reigning welterweight champion, and you're as dominant as he is, and you're considered one of the pound-for-pound best in the world, you're always going to be criticized.
No matter what?
Unless you come out and start Mike Tyson and guys. And then when you go out there and you blast guys, you know, you knock guys out like Tyson used to, then there's no competition. Everybody's not good enough to fight you. There's always going to be criticisms. It's just the way it is.
I don't know if you know this, but I believe this means that George St-Pierre has won 30 straight rounds, which is pretty remarkable. He's had a lot of impressive performances. Would you rank this one up there?
Yeah. Actually, I thought he looked incredible tonight. He fought a perfect fight, had a great game plan. You know, he's out there against a guy who is very athletic, very well-rounded, comes from a great camp, has great trainers, meaning Josh Koscheck, and George St-Pierre absolutely picked him apart tonight, easily.
Everyone wants to know what's next, and I know you hate when we ask you what's next at the post-fight press conference, but you did say a couple months ago that Jake Shields was next. Did what he did out there in terms of striking, and when you consider Jake Shields' biggest weakness is his striking, make you think twice about that?
Listen, people talk about that all the time, too, about Jake Shields striking being this and that. Jake Shields keeps winning fights, man, and one thing about Jake is, you know, his wrestling is superb, and when he gets it to the ground, he beats you. You know, he had a rough fight coming into the UFC. It happens to everybody. You get those jitters or whatever the thing is that shakes guys up in their first fights in the UFC, except for the kid that fought on the undercard tonight. He didn't get it, but
McDessie.
Yeah, and you know, we'll see what happens.
You have always ruled out the fight against Anderson Silva, George versus Anderson at any weight. Now it seems as though both you and George are starting to warm up to it. I know Anderson obviously has to fight Vitor Belfort, but can you say right now that there's no chance they fight in Toronto?
It's not that I ruled it out. What happened was, at that time, when everybody was talking about it, I honestly believed that Anderson Silva would move up to 205 pounds. I felt like he had cleaned out that division. I thought he'd move up to 205. He had beat a couple guys there. But then when he was adamant about not doing it, what are you going to do? The other thing is, you've never heard stories of Anderson Silva having problems cutting weight. You know, he walks around at 215. He's a monster and can hang with the 205-pounders, yet he's 30-something years old, 5 or 6, and doesn't have problem cutting the weight. So maybe he can make 180. I don't know. My job, I believe, is to put on the fights that the fans want to see.
So there is a shot that they could fight in Toronto?
No, I didn't say Toronto. I mean,
no, I'm saying just at some point, a lot of people say if Anderson beats Vitor, and since GSP looks so good, that's a fight a lot of people want to see, especially in such a big venue like that.
Well, if Anderson beat Vitor, he'd still have to fight. George is going to fight. The next guy that's getting the shot is
Jake
Shields. Yeah.
Okay. Stefan Struve, you said that this was sort of a showcase fight for him. You have to feel pretty good about what he did, right?
I do, and I think that he made light of his fight because tonight wasn't an absolute dogfight where he just got destroyed in the first round and had to come out and win in spectacular fashion in the second round. You know, and I heard that people were talking this being the co-main event. That guy deserved to be the co-main event tonight, and you know, I agree with what the reporters said to him earlier. Well, it didn't look easy in the first. It looked like you were about to get your arm ripped off, and he was, and he got out of it. Nice sweep, got on top, and finished the fight. That kid's becoming an exciting new heavyweight.
Safe to say he's now in the sort of Carwin-Lesnar mix?
He's in the mix.
Jim Miller also in the mix. He needed to finish that fight. It seems as though he always gets ignored, and no one was even talking about this fight. It wasn't even on the Countdown show, which surprised me a little bit. Why do you think he's been ignored, and do you think people will now start to recognize him?
Well, there's a different reason on why he wasn't on the Countdown show, and it's not because he was disrespected. It might seem that way, but
What is the reason?
The reason is because we didn't fly all the way down to Brazil to do the other interviews, so you can't just have one guy. And the fight wasn't that high up on the card that we would fly to Brazil for that fight. And the other thing is, he sat here through, I don't know how long it was tonight, a 45-minute hour press conference, and answered no questions till the end of the press conference. He's just one of those guys. Even though he won spectacularly tonight, nobody was all over him. And listen, there's some guys that have that route. Fitch has taken that route. Chuck Liddell had that route early on in his career, and many, many other guys. He's just one of those guys that has to work hard and do it better than everybody else to get noticed. He got noticed tonight. I was very impressed. When he jumped and went after that leg, me and Lorenzo both looked at each other and said, that was dumb, and he's doing the Tank Abbott toe hold there, and then ends up pulling off that beautiful knee bar against a guy who's a serious guy, and I respect that.
Two last questions about this card. Do you think Joe Stevenson is done?
No. I have a lot of respect for Joe Stevenson, and me and Joe were talking about it tonight, me and Joe Silva. We both, what we ask of these guys when they come in is to come in and fight. And Joe Daddy comes in and he fights. He got knocked out tonight trying to finish. He was trying to knock Danzig out, and he got caught. And I like guys that come in and go for it, and he's one of those guys.
We talked on Thursday about there being a lot on the line for Thiago Alves. He kind of shut everyone up, right? I mean, he looked great and he fought great.
Yeah. And you know what I think the biggest thing is for Thiago is being on weight. Doing it the right way, cutting the right way. He's a fantastic fighter when he does things the right way. You saw that tonight, and hopefully we continue to see that from him.
Montreal fans are a little worried that now that Toronto is in the mix, that some of these cards won't come to Montreal and they'll go to Toronto. Is that the case?
I've been hearing that from everywhere we go. When we were doing fights in all these other places, oh no, now that you just got that state open, you won't come here anymore. Listen, we're going to go everywhere, and we're going to continue to do fights all around the world, whether they're big fights or they're fight nights or they're Ultimate Fighter finales. We're going everywhere. No need for anybody to worry.
And very last question. I don't know if you know this, but Alistair Overeem won the K1 World Grand Prix finals in Japan earlier this morning. Does that at least make you a little more interested in the guy, and what does that tell you about him? I know you always say that K1 and MMA are two different things, but that's pretty impressive for a guy coming from MMA to do that.
Well, he didn't come from MMA. He comes from kickboxing K1. That's where he really comes from. And yes, I'm happy for Alistair Overeem. And let's clear something up here. Let's just make something very clear. I like Alistair Overeem very much as a person. You never hear me say anything bad about him. I don't ever say anything negative or bad about this guy. I like him. What I'm talking about, I'm stating facts. Okay, just because he went over and won the K1 has nothing to do. They're going to rank him in the top 10 in mixed martial arts because he won the K1. When's the last time he defended his mixed martial arts title?
May.
And the guys over in Strikeforce, these guys can't even put fights together. What's hilarious? Vitor loses. Okay, he loses his fight in Strikeforce. And Strikeforce is having a hard time negotiating to get him back into Strikeforce to fight again. Are you kidding me? I mean, come on, you guys. If there's going on in the UFC, it'd be mayhem. You guys would be busting my balls and going crazy. Come on. You know what I mean? The fact that I even have to be asked and try to answer questions like this is insane.
Okay, I feel like I just ruined your night here. Okay, so
I'm just getting it out there. I'm just
wondering if that made you a little more interested in him.
Yeah, I like Alistair Overeem. Do I agree with you guys that he's top 10? No, I don't agree with you guys. Just because he won the K1 tournament, and good for you. I actually had a kid on Twitter updating me all night on what was going on because I was curious to see if he was going to win it. I like the guy. I do not dislike this guy. He's you meet him, there's not a nicer guy. He couldn't be nicer.
The bottom line is, though, he needs to go out and fight credible opponents and beat them, and then you'd be interested.
Exactly. And listen, people love to play up the whole thing before, Strikeforce and that. Strikeforce is the minor leagues. Now they're talking about the fights they haven't. The last week's fights were complete mismatches. And if you don't think they are, you're out of your mind, okay? Period.
Everyone's saying that show was better than your show, right? That's what bugged you.
Well, No, it doesn't bug me at all. We could put on those kind of shows. That's not what we do. We put on shows with the best fighters in the world. The best fight the best. We could put on shows like that all day, where you get one guy that can go in and knock another guy out easily. You know what I mean? You serious, Matt Lindland? You know what I mean? Come on, give me a break, you guys. And listen, Scott Smith's a great kid too. I like him. He didn't even make it in the Ultimate Fighter. He didn't make it in the Ultimate Fighter, and he didn't make it on the Ultimate Fight Nights. He got cut because he couldn't cut it here. So come on, let's be honest.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Dana White, UFC 124. Great show, Dana, and good luck on your travels wherever they are outside of the country.
Yeah, thank you.